of today's webinar. A great job, Claire. You should be very delighted with putting together such an interesting and exciting and pertinent collection of speakers, and say well done to my fellow speakers for making their presentations understandable to me. So that's a very good test, because it's not necessarily my area of expertise. So without wasting any more of precious time, I would like to tell you what the NanosafetyCluster is and what's the relevance of the NanosafetyCluster in today's topic, which is, of course, understanding the concept of safe by design and its tools and applications. And perhaps for the audience of this webinar, you might as well consider the NanosafetyCluster as yet another tool, but slightly different. So it's more of a human resource tool, or of a source of experts tool, potentially for many of you, and that's the way to look at the NanosafetyCluster, or that's how I hope you might consider the NanosafetyCluster. It all started as it was an initiative by the European Commission with the idea to bring all the projects that they have spent good taxpayers' money funding together into a common forum, a common environment where these projects could interact. The NanosafetyCluster has been going on for nearly 10 years now, and it has changed quite a bit. Some of its more recent transformations will be part of what I'm presenting to you today. But it has always been about maximizing synergies between projects, and also being open to not only EU funded projects, but also national and indeed international projects that might want to join forces with us and interact with the group of EU experts involved in nanosafety research. It evolved from initially being a very toxicology focused forum to becoming a lot more open to other scientific and also user influences. So a lot of the work moved into understanding mechanisms of interaction, for example, of nanomaterials with the surroundings, whether biological or environmental, addressing issues of standardization, and more recently topics around modeling, the use of omics tools, and of course now also safe by design. So this is what the cluster is in a nutshell. Claire asked me to say a little bit about our membership, and as it happens, I'm quite blind to the membership in that I don't actually hold the list of members, so maybe a note to self to get hold of this list of members. But I understand our newsletter goes to some 800 recipients' email addresses, so you could say that we have about 800 members. Very much our membership is very much focused around Europe, but we're not a closed club. We're open to non-European members, and I suspect we do have some non-European members. If any of the attendees of today's webinar are interested in more details about our membership, I will get my details. I will make them available to you all if you wish to ask about that. But I will move on to my next slide now. And this is showing you the structure on the NanosafetyCluster. It's a little bit of a scary slide, but it just shows you that we opted in our latest transformation to quite a complex structure to address the needs of the community more comprehensively. So we have a coordination team. So if Claire clicks the next slide, it will appear in a red highlight that the coordination team, as you would expect, coordinates. And in fact, it's not just me. it's 4 of us coordinating the NanosafetyCluster, and in fact we have a nice mix of academia, which is represented by myself and my colleague Isolde Lynch, industry through Andreas Falk, and regulation through Fleming Cassie. So we hopefully are quite diverse in our interests and our support to the community. The next level of direction to the NanosafetyCluster comes from our steering group, and if Claire again clicks the go forward button, you can see where that is, and the steering group actually takes the decision. So we try and take as few decisions at coordination level as possible, and as many at steering group level. And the steering group consists of our project coordinators. So it's a group of some 20 people. And then the next level is our various structures. So again, Claire, if you press the next button, you'll see there's the communication group. So the 3 structures, communication group, working groups, and task forces, support the work of the cluster. The communication group, in fact, has been hosting you today, and Claire is heading up this group. And we also have our working groups, which are means of cutting the pie, if you like, the nanosafety pie, into smaller chunks, more digestible chunks. So we have subgroups of our based on different areas of expertise, and I'll show that in my next slide. But I would also like to say a little bit about our task forces, and again something that I will be briefly presenting later. Our task forces are an experiment, so they are activities we define. So if any one of you comes to us and says we have this activity that we would like the NanosafetyCluster to undertake, then we try and turn it into a task force, which means that we give it a floor and we give people an opportunity to consider it, and if the steering group likes it, this task force goes forward into a fully blown activity which has a short-term life and a very specific aim. And like I said, I'll give you an example in a minute. And finally, if you press the final button, Claire, you'll see that the last 2 units in my complex slide are the Commission, which always is a source of interaction and information in both ways to us. And also, of course, we're open to communicating with the world. And indeed, one of our most successful activities is our communities of research, which is between ourselves and our US colleagues. So moving on to the next slide. Thank you, Claire. So these are our working groups, and I won't go through the details of these groups in the interest of time, but it's important to say that this is a latest restructuring of our working groups, and we try and keep them live, active, and relevant. And as you can see, some highlights perhaps worth mentioning, that data management is a cross topic working group, because data has become such an important topic of nanosafety. I would like to move on then to the next slide, which just gives you a little bit of a flavor. Now you hopefully understand a bit more about what the NanosafetyCluster is. Maybe that gives you a list of things that the cluster could do for you. So as our primary objective, it is very much to carry on or go even further in our contributing to science policy, and very much in the context of safe by design, for example, developing an instructions manual of what safe by design is. So that's how we see our role in developing science policy. And so translating the project science into policy solutions, and also coordinated within the cluster and around the cluster scientific research, and very importantly ensuring that whatever science we have produced and created within the cluster, it's sustainable, and it remains available to the community, to industry, to regulators beyond the lifetime of a project. And we very much see this as the key role for the nanosafety cluster. We also have some important dissemination activities. Indeed, you're listening to one of our dissemination activities, and I should also emphasize that one that's very much about the cluster itself is coming to you as a webinar on November the 20th. So please, if you want to hear more about what the cluster is all about and what it can do for you, please attend that webinar. And of course, a key role for us is to maximize impact with our various stakeholders, and we consider this as broad as it can be, and we don't discriminate whether this is industry, regulation, or indeed academia. And if we could move to my next slide, please, Claire. Thank you. So the NanosafetyCluster Task Force for the definition of safe by design. So if you thought this was a free webinar, you were wrong. In fact, this webinar is part of a big scheme of coming up with a definition of what safe by design is. And given the earlier discussions, I'm sure we all have a better feel of what it really means. The need, though, to put together a task force and actually work on the definition comes from the fact that when you ask people what do you understand as safe by design, everybody has an opinion. Or, well, maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration. Many people have an opinion, not necessarily grounded on as I was saying earlier, on a specific instructions manual. Here is your safe by design tool, if you like. So this was part of the reason why we felt that the task force is important. So the status of this task force, and I know I'm preempting a little bit my next slide, but the status of this task force is currently with Claire is heading it up, and we've put together, because she's supported, of course, by the coordination team, a proposal which will go to the steering committee for approval very, very soon. I hope it will be approved, and once it's approved, it will involve certain further activities, so further webinars, face-to-face meetings, real, hopefully, integration and discussion between all interested stakeholders, so that we can give the definition life, if you like. If we can move to my next slide, please, Claire. Thank you. So we're seeing this activity as starting pretty much imminently and carrying on until July 2018. So we don't want to drag our feet and spend too long considering this definition, but we want to give it our best shot in a short period of time, because this is important that it then becomes available to both industry and regulators, rather than in a nearly perfect form, rather than a draft that will perpetuate and won't support the needs of the wider community. And as I said, this will go for internal decision very, very soon, and will hopefully become as an open to the wider world activity very soon also. Once it is, you will definitely know, because it will be posted on our website, on UN's website, and the webinars and the activities will start very shortly. So moving on, I realize I'm nearly out of time, so I'll try and be as brief as I can with the next few slides. I'll just say that we don't want to be static. We have a vision for the future, and this vision is very much about raising the profile of the cluster and supporting the community better, becoming really very much the go-to point for any questions to do with nano safety. So we want people to know how they can find information through us. One of our recent decisions was to actually put a directory of experts and make it available on our website. So if someone wants an expert on, I don't know, inhalation exposure, this directory should hopefully point you to the right people. But also you can always get in touch with us and ask us. Long-term and innovation governance platform. So the NanosafetyCluster becomes our innovation governance platform. Can I move to the next slide, please, Claire? Okay, so just a few words. A very big hot topic currently is data. How can we bring all this incredible amount of data created by individual projects within the NanosafetyCluster together? And even when we're considering open data as the norm, that's still not a solution, because data can be in various forms. It can come with metadata, it can come with information, or it can come completely raw. Raw data is less usable than data in a format and a structure that's integratable. So we are, in fact, last week we had a very successful, I think, 2-day meeting talking about how we can bring all the NanosafetyCluster projects data together. It's not an easy task, but we've started it, and I'm very happy that, so again, watch that space. Next slide, please. And a very important tool towards this is this very, very newly funded project called Nano Commons, which is coordinated by University of Birmingham and my colleague Isolde Lynch, and starts in January, and it's an infrastructure project. If you want to know a little bit more about what an infrastructure project is, the next and final slide shows you. So if I can have my final slides, please, Claire, thank you. So an infrastructure project is not just about research, but it's also about networking, and it's also about giving access to people to things that they actually want. So all the research under Nano Commons will be very much about data integration, data harmonization, and access to data discussion. So the networking part would bring people talking together about how they can benefit from what data is available, how to optimize what we have, how to make future data collection even better, and finally, what access we can offer as an infrastructure to people for the data they need to access, or for the data they have and they wish it to be made available to others and curated and saved for posterity. And at this point, I will end and thank you all for listening.